Pastor Travis. Definitely an honor to be with y'all today at Hebron Baptist Church. And I think we scheduled this maybe close to a year ago, a little less. So I definitely been looking forward to being in Denham Springs this morning. And I hear God is doing some great things through this church in this community. And so, again, exciting times for y'all. And so I'll tell you what, you might say, well, Jeff, who are you? Well, so I'm with the Louisiana Baptist Foundation. And we're one of your ministries. And so I'll kind of give you a brief rundown. So thank you, by the way, for what you do for Cooperative Program. I feel very confident in saying this. There is someone in the world at this very moment hearing the gospel because of Cooperative Program. So thank you for the way you invest in that. There are several ministries involved with Baptist Family Life. You have the convention, of course, in Alexandria. You have Louisiana Christian University in Pineville with Dr. Brewer over there, formerly Louisiana College. And then you have Louisiana Baptist Children's Home with Dr. Hancock over in Monroe area, and Baptist Message with Dr. Will Hall, and then the foundation with myself. And so we're all kind of working together in different contexts for the sake of advancing the kingdom. We love what we do. And so again, thank you for being a part of all that God is doing in Louisiana through the Cooperative Program and around the world at this very moment. And so let me do this. Let me kind of introduce my family to you this morning, if that's okay. And so on the far left is Corey. He's our 20-year-old in DFW area, going to school over there and working part-time at a church, probably running around the church right now, just getting some things ready for Sunday morning worship. And then my wife Shannon and I, we've been married 31 years, almost 32, but 31 years. Met at a Baptist church in Arlington, Texas, many years ago, and get this, in a business meeting. Okay, there are good things that come from business meetings, right? And so that was about 32, 33 years ago that we met in that business meeting. And I'll be honest with you, we talked the entire time through business meeting. No. But yeah, we live in Alexandria, Shanna and I do. And so in the central part of the state. And in fact, we live on the outskirts near Boyce, Gardner, out that way. And kind of out in the woods, and my kids tell me I live in the boondocks, and we tell them we love living in the boondocks and just enjoying God's country out there. And so, of course, this is a wedding picture, and Whitney got married a couple of years ago to Stephen, and Whitney is serving at a church. She is a children's minister at a church in Fort Worth area, and probably teaching at this moment as well. And so very proud of her. And they've got VBS this week, so you know there's a lot going on. But yeah, they got married a couple years ago. Stephen is a high school soccer coach in Azle and also a teacher. And so again, just wanted to introduce us. And so got to see them a few weeks ago, our kids. And so anyway, we've been in the state, I have, for... So it'll be a little over 3 years now. And Shannon and I, and serving at the Louisiana Baptist Foundation, we love what we do. I've been involved with the Southern Baptist of Texas Foundation, and then also Arkansas Baptist Foundation. So I love foundation ministry work. And so yeah, just wanted to kind of introduce our family to you. And the foundation, you might say, well, Jeff, what does the foundation do? So we are often behind the scenes of churches. And what I mean by that is a part of what we do is manage money for churches, getting them more money on their money, because we realize every additional dollar we're able to generate beyond a bank is literally another dollar for the kingdom. And so we work really hard at that. And by the way, thank you to Hebron Baptist Church for the partnership and ministry. We manage several accounts for y'all, and we're grateful for that. And so we also manage endowments, which are long-term funds. We also, I do a lot of teaching in the state on stewardship and some other areas as well. And then we offer some business administrative services related to church loans and capital campaigns and several areas, as you can see on the screen there. And so we love what we do, and just serving churches and other ministries all around the state of Louisiana. We also work with individuals a lot. And so by individuals, just about every day, we're working with some individual somewhere in the state of Louisiana that's doing something special for their church financially beyond cash. And we help with folks like this week received a stock gift. It's not for us. We receive these types of gifts, sell them, and send the funds on to the church. And so we help with stock gifts and mutual funds and IRA gifts and estate gifts and you name it. So we get to work with some phenomenal Louisiana Baptists all around the state that have a heart and passion to benefit the Lord's work beyond cash as well. So that's kind of who we are. And at the foundation, again, we love what we do in just serving. And so let me do this. Let me kind of set the stage for our theme today. Thus says the Lord, set your house in order. So the house that we're talking about really relates more to estates in this arena, related to being good stewards, related to what God's provided to us over the years. And the information should be helpful if you're the age of 20 or if you're the age of 100 or whatever age you are. Really hope the information is going to be helpful to you today and in your own context. And so, again, the house, we're dealing with is more stewardship and estates. And did everybody get a workbook that would like one? I'm kind of a note person, so I always like to provide these. I also want to just say thank you. Thank you for doing something a little different this morning. And I prayed early this morning that God would use information that we're going to talk about in a way that's helpful to you and your family and potentially His kingdom. And so I really do hope it's going to be helpful to you today and talking about how to get our house in order. So what I want to do in our brief time together is talk about how to set your house in order biblically. We're going to lay a biblical foundation for what we're talking about here today, okay? And the importance of it from a stewardship standpoint. We're going to talk about how to protect and provide for families. And I had a lady come up to me a while back at a church and before the session, and she said, "Jeff, I know why you're at my church today." I said, "Well, that's good, you know." And she said, "And I'm not sure if I need the information." I said, well, tell me a little bit more." And she said, "Well, I've told my family everything I want done when I get to go to heaven." And I was real nice about it, but I said it doesn't matter. In Louisiana, it has to be in writing. It has to be in writing. And so that's a myth out there, you know, that if you tell your family what you want done when you get to go to heaven, you know, it'll be done, but legally it won't be done that way. And so part of what we're talking about here today is how to be on the offense, related to just having those plans in place to protect our families and to leave impact, to leave legacies to those values that we have cherished in life, right? And so we'll talk about also how to control the distribution of your assets one day. We'll also talk about how to reduce or eliminate taxes. That's a big one for some folks. And in addition to your family, how to make tax-deductible gift to your church, favorite ministry, or charity related to impacting the Lord's work, advancing the kingdom through estates. And so that's kind of where we're heading, okay? So what I want to do, I'm going to use two words several times during the session today. And so I want to give you those definitions in the beginning. First definition, you see it on the screen, is called estate, right? And some of you are going, "Well, Jeff, that's what I have when I get to go to heaven one day," right? And that's true, but it's also everything you have right now. Everything that God's blessed you with. And it's not something we think about every day, right? But think about what you have, you know, your real estate and your bank accounts and life insurance and heirlooms, all that good stuff. I mean, that's all that God's blessed us with, right? And we realize when we start thinking about that, how blessed we are, right? Related to what God's provided, you know, to us. There is likely not a person in the room to where you've ever truly been in need, right? God's met our every need. He's met our every need. And when we start talking about this area, we realize, again, how blessed we are that God has provided so much to us. And so estate, again, is what you have. The second definition I'm going to give to you, and I don't have a slide for it, but is called probate, okay? Now, in Louisiana, what do we call that? Succession, right, succession. And, you know, in Louisiana, we always have to have a unique word, right, for different things. And that's our unique word in Louisiana related to probate. It's succession. What that is okay? And some of you know what that is because you've been the executor for a family member who has passed away, okay? And so, but what succession is, or probate, is basically, so let's take me. Let's say I get to go to heaven today, right? And my will goes through succession, okay? That's a court process to make sure that everything that's in that will is going to be accomplished. There are some folks that like to avoid succession, probate, but I actually like it. Because that means that everything that's in my will is going to be accomplished. There's someone overseeing that, a court system. And we have a pretty efficient court system, probate court system in Louisiana. It's a pretty efficient process, the great majority of the time. And by the way, any estate planning attorneys in the room by chance? Anybody? I was going to ask them to testify to that. We've got a pretty efficient system, for handling estates. And so again, think of succession as just that process as far as how do you get your assets from A to B when you go to heaven one day, right? And through your will. So those two different definitions I wanted to give to you this morning, and before we kind of jump into our biblical foundation. And so I'm going to give you 4 biblical foundations or principles related to what we're talking about here this morning, and being good stewards related to what God's blessed us with. And the first principle is this. The first biblical principle is we should set our house in order. And some of you are thinking about the Old Testament story that this has to do with. And it's found over in Isaiah. So let me set the stage for this for a minute. So God told prophet Isaiah, I want you to get the king. And I want you to give the king heads up. He's about to pass on, right? And what was the king's name, by the way? Anybody? Hezekiah. Man, y'all are with it. There were several folks that said that, and I have the honor to be in quite a few churches, and that's not a word we use very often, right? So people usually don't get that. But so God told prophet Isaiah, go to King Hezekiah and give him a heads up. He's about to pass on. Now kings back then had a lot of power. Had a lot of power. They could do whatever they wanted to, or whatever they wanted to an individual. They had a lot of power. And if I'd been Isaiah back in the day, I might be a little hesitant to go to the king and say, hey, king, you're about to die. I might be a little hesitant because you don't know how he's going to react, right? Now, I feel like I know Isaiah just a little bit from his personality in Scripture. I don't think Isaiah hesitated at all. I think he went straight to the king and let it be known, right? And because of that, and these are the words, by the way, thus says the Lord, set your house in order, you shall die, not live, that Hezekiah heard that day many years ago. And probably being the king of a nation, got his plans in place pretty quickly, right? And so he had heads up. But most of us don't have a heads up when we're going to heaven, right? Which I think is a good thing typically. But we don't know. For me, it could be today. For any of us, right? We just simply don't know, right? That's in God's economy. And so again, one of the things that I want to encourage us to do today is just to have plans in place, right? To protect our families and to leave impact to those that we want to leave impact to. And James reminds us in James 4:14 how short-term we're on this earth. You've heard the phrase before, we're just passing through. In the grand scheme of all time, we are just passing through. In James, he says, yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. It's a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. I like to think of it like this. Think about an eternal timeline. So over here is the beginning of all time. Before God created anything, the beginning of all time. And follow that timeline over here. And remember back in math class a few years ago, that sideways 8, remember, which is what? Infinity, or I like to think of eternity, right? So that's the eternal timeline. Now, your earthly life, my earthly life, might be a little dot on that timeline, right? If it even shows up, right? In the grand expanse of all time. Right? So again, we're just passing through. We're here very short term in the grand expanse of all time. And because of that, we just need to simply have plans in place to make sure that we have prepared to take care of our family when we are enjoying heaven. And so This picture is an analogy of 70% of Americans, okay? 70% of Americans, this house, as far as the falling in, the foundation issues, all that, 70% of Americans don't have their house in order. And, you know, that doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your income level, doesn't matter where you live in the nation. 70% of Americans across the board don't have plans in place. So part of what I want to do today is to encourage you to have plans in place. And by the way, in the state of Louisiana, when someone passes away and they don't have a will, the state of Louisiana has a backup will, okay? I read it the other day, not the most exciting reading, okay? But I was reading through that, and it would not accomplish probably what 99% of us would want accomplished, okay? So that's why it's so important to be on the offense, to make sure that we've got our plan in place, to state exactly what we want done to where that default will doesn't come into play from the state. And so if you're in that 70%, I just encourage you to get it done, to be good stewards. A friend had stopped by the office a few days ago and said, hey, he's talking about him and his wife needing to get plans done. I said, I encourage you to get it done. You know, it's good stewardship related to what God's blessed you with. The 30% in the room that have plans in place, one of the things I want to encourage you as we're talking today is it up to date? Does it accomplish everything you want done? For most of us, there is something major that happens in our families every year that may impact that will. So it's good to make sure it stays up to date, okay? So another biblical principle I want to give to you is we're to honor God with all that we have. And we'd all agree with that. And we're to honor God with all that we have. There's a great verse over in Proverbs 3:9. Honor the Lord with your wealth and from the first of all your produce. Now, let's kind of break this down for a second. First of all, your produce, we get that. That's based upon other scriptures we know in context. We know that's dealing with what? The tithe. We know the importance of that, giving 10% off the gross to the Lord's work, right, to our church. But the first part of this, I'll be honest with you, I've forgotten the first part of this sometimes. What does it say? Honor the Lord with your wealth. Now, remember a while ago we defined what the word estate was? It's what you have, right? Theologically, you can plug that in here if you want to. Honor the Lord with your estate. That means even on a daily basis, if we're a steward, if we're a manager over what God's provided to us, you know, that starts impacting our daily decisions, right? I mean, if we're trying to honor the Lord with what He's blessed us with. And I'll say this as well, you know, Jeffrey Steed, I own nothing, right? I don't own a penny. What I have, God allows me to be a manager over, a steward over it, right? And again, that's what this verse is really kind of focusing in on, that what I have and being a steward over that, I'm to honor the Lord with that, with those decisions related to what He's blessed me with. And again, that deals with our estates now. I believe that deals with our estates when we go to heaven one day, right? So everything that we have under that umbrella that God allows us to manage, to be a steward over, is basically we're to honor Him in some way through those assets. There's a thought or a quote I want to give to you. I came up with a while back, and I'll tell you why I'm making it. But the quote is this: as believers in the room today, as followers of Jesus Christ in the room today, the most significant stewardship decision of our entire life will be through our will one day. And you might say, Jeff, what do you mean by that? Well, for most of us, the largest personal transfer of wealth will occur when we go to heaven one day through our will. And whether that's $10, whether that's $10 million, it doesn't matter. The largest stewardship decision for you and I personally will take place through that will one day. And now I have folks tell me periodically, well, Jeff, you know, I'm going to spend it all in retirement. I might leave the kids a few bucks, but I'm going to spend it all. And you've seen the bumper sticker, right, on the back of the RV on spending my kids' inheritance, right? But I'm just telling you, the majority of the time, that's not what happens. And the reason is this: what is the number one fear in America for those in retirement? The number one fear in America for those in retirement is what? That's it. Running out of money. And so if you're tempted to have that fear, you are not alone. okay? The majority of Americans that are retirees, that's their number one fear, okay? Which means what? When we retire, we become very conservative with what we have. Right? Our budgets, we're watching those closer than ever before, and we're often living off the income. We might have some Social Security or pension coming in. We might have some investments, some stocks, bonds, CDs, whatever, and we're taking the income off of that, or the growth, and we're living off of that, right? So that corpus, or principle of what we have, basically sometimes even grows in retirement, right? You might say, well, Jeff, that doesn't make sense. I know. But because of fear of running out of money, we've become very conservative with what we have. And so, which that means what? The largest personal transfer of wealth for most of us in the room will occur when we go to heaven one day. Which means what? As believers in the room today, the most significant stewardship decision of our entire life will take place of that will. So that's why it's so important, I believe, as a believer, to make sure we've got good plans in place related to our estates. Biblical principle number 3, we're to provide for our families. And we'd all agree with that, right? We know the significance of that, providing for our families. There are, and I'll say this, especially those of you in the room that have minor children, it is so important to have a will. And one of the reasons for that is to make sure you properly prepare for those kids if something happened to you, okay? And there's some really good ways to handle that. Also, if in just about every audience I have the honor to speak to, there's at least 1 or 2 adults in the room, or couples that have a special needs adult child, okay? And let me just say briefly, it's really, really important as well for you to make sure you've got a good will to include that special needs adult child, because if they were to inherit suddenly from you, so most of the time they're in government assistance, right? Special needs adult children usually are in government assistance. If they were to inherit suddenly from mom and dad, they could be disqualified from all that. So there's some really effective ways, legally obviously, really effective ways to avoid that. So, and if that's you, I encourage you to reach out to the foundation, to me or Jared Price. Jared's name is on the back. Actually, both of our names are on the back bottom of this page here, which I encourage you to keep as a reference. And I encourage you to reach out to us if that's your scenario. Jared's our attorney that worked with folks full time. Around the state on various scenarios. And so he can kind of help you give more detail related to special needs scenarios related to adult children. But also, who else? What are other family members that we need to provide for? I had a woman a while back. She said, Jeff, my mom is in a financially destitute situation. She's impoverished. She literally has nothing. And this is the daughter talking. And she said, literally, she's depending upon me for her livelihood, to put food on the table. And she asked me, should I put my mom in my will? I said, absolutely. Absolutely. Any family member, legitimately, I believe, that of need, if we were no longer here, we need to make sure we provide for them properly. There's a great verse I'm going to give to you. And by the way, I want to put a disclaimer on it. Paul was not talking about estate planning, okay, in this verse. But I believe generally we can apply it, okay? So it's found over in 1 Timothy 5:8. Paul was writing these letters, as you know, to Timothy to kind of mentor him, coach him in the faith, right? And this is what he told Timothy in 1 Timothy 5:8. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he's denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Pretty strong words from Paul. You know that was his personality, right? Came across very strong. But again, he does remind us of the importance of providing for those of our household, especially those, and I'll add a note to that, especially those that would literally be of need if we were no longer here, right? And so I want to give you another biblical principle, one more. We're to be generous with the blessings that God gives to us. And we'd all agree with that, right? And, you've heard the phrase before. God often blesses so that what? That's right. So we can be blessing other people in His church and His kingdom, and it's actually scriptural. I had the honor to preach on this a while back over in 2 Corinthians 9:11. This is a powerful verse, Brother Ray. 2 Corinthians 9:11. You'll be enriched in everything for all liberality, which through us is producing thanksgiving to God. Now let's focus in the first two lines of that for a minute, okay? So you'll be enriched. What's another word for enriched? Blessed, right. So you'll be blessed in everything for all. What's another word for liberality? It's on the tip of your tongue. What's another word for liberality? Generosity. Generosity. So let's reread this based upon those first two lines. You'll be blessed in everything for all generosity. Think about the significance of what that's saying. God often blesses so that we can be a blessing to other people, right? And I believe that when we want to be generous to somebody, and God may speak to you in the next few days about maybe a neighbor you have or somebody you work with or go to school with. If somebody's in need right now, and God may speak to you to be generous to that person, right? Christ left the earth about 2,000 years ago, right? And when He did, He left the responsibility to us to be His hands and feet, right? And one of the ways scripturally we can do that is through generosity, extending the hand of Christ to those in need. And so when you think about the whole idea of generosity, again, that's a way we can literally be the extension of hands and feet of Christ. And that has to do with now as well as through our states one day. Think about this. In a will, typically, what happens, and I'm going to generalize for a minute here, but what happens is someone passes away, and then that will is going to go through succession. All the last bills and debts are paid first. Okay? All the last bills and debts are dealt with first. They're done away with. Everything left is basically going to beneficiaries, right? And so if there's certain specific items you have going to individuals, jewelry, a family farm, or whatever, right, that you want to go to specific individuals, you can dictate that, right, in your will. Everything else is called the residue, okay? That's all that word means. It's just what's left, the residue, right? And that's usually distributed based on percentages. And those percentages add up to 100, of course, right? And so again, you're enjoying heaven, right, at the time, but your will's going through that succession, that process, right? And after all the bills and debts are paid, everything that's just going out to individuals, to ministries, whatever, is generosity, right? There's no strings attached. You're just giving it away, right? And so at the heart of what we're talking about here today, being good stewards related to what God's blessed us with, the heart of that is generosity, right? And so these are four biblical principles I wanted to give to you. One of the ones I really want you to remember is all that we're talking about here today, this morning, is related to stewardship, related to what God has blessed us with, and having good plans in place to protect those that family members and others that we want protected through our will, and then also to leave impact, to leave legacies to those things that we have valued in life, individuals and ministries that we've cared for. And so I want to kind of jump into the logistics, like how do you make it happen, okay? And so one of the questions I've gotten a lot over the years is, Jeff, summarize it for me. What do people typically have related to estate plans, right? And these four documents on the screen are the typical documents people have. Now, if you have a complex situation, it could be more than this. But probably 95% of us in the room, this is what people typically have when they have documents in place. One is a last will and testament. Testament means testimony, right? Our last testimony, as far as what we have valued, what's important to us, is right there in writing, right, in our document. I'm going to come back to that one, okay? The second document people tend to have is called a durable power of attorney over finances. Now, what that is, a durable power, and some of you know what that is because you are the power of attorney. It's called the agent, okay, is that person. You're the power of attorney agent for a parent or a sibling or whoever, right, a spouse. So some of you know what this is. And by the way, some of you may be named in those documents with a parent and you just don't know it yet. Yeah, but I mean, basically what it is it's valid only while you're living. I was in a church a while back, and I got the same question basically 3 different times. Jeff, does it extend past somebody's, past their living? And the answer is no. So it works like this. So let's say I went into a coma today. And by the way, I realize some of what we're talking about here today is not the easiest thing to think about. But I encourage you to think about it, okay, to make sure you've got good plans to protect your family and protect you. And so a power of attorney, again, I go into a coma today, right? My power of attorney agent steps in my shoes and is me for all practical purposes, for all financial decisions. It is a lot of power to give to somebody, okay? A lot of power. So you want to be able to prayerfully make that decision, who that's going to be for you. And again, a very high trust level with that person. And you always want to back up. But again, so I'm in that coma, somebody steps in my shoes, my agent starts paying the bills, right? Keeping things rolling. And really in charge of my finances, right? 2 weeks later, I come out of that coma. Things just continue as normal, okay? And so again, a power of attorney, hopefully it's a document you may never need. But it's so important to have it, okay? And so that's a power of attorney over finances, valid only while you're living, right? And then the same idea, it's called a power of attorney over medical. Like if you can't make medical decisions on your own, who's going to make that for you? And then you always want to back up, okay? And so the fourth document, so the first 3 on here are customized or personalized towards an individual, okay? And so the fourth one is usually a form. And if you're in the medical field, you definitely know what a living will is. It's usually a form. And so it's basically a letter to your doctor of what to do or what not to do in certain circumstances. Okay? It's I think about 4 years ago, I rolled over to my wife in the morning. It was about 4 a.m. in the morning. And I said, Shanna, I've got to go to the hospital. I feel like I was dying. I've never had pain like that in my entire life, okay? And I didn't know what was going on, and so she knew something was up. So we made it to the hospital in about 5 minutes in Mansfield, Texas, when we lived there. And I get to the hospital. And, by the way, kidney stones, you want to avoid those. You do not want one of those, okay? And can I get an amen to that, And so it's like, oh, my word, I've never, well, if you've had one. And so I get there. Didn't know what was going on, right? Felt like I was dying. And extreme pain. And they give me 53 pages to fill out, okay? And thankfully, Shanna was able to help me with that because I did not care about that paperwork at the moment. And one of the questions on there is what? Do you have a living will? And if you don't have one, they put a form in front of you real quick because they want to know what to do, right? If you can't make those decisions. And so these are the 4 documents people tend to have related to estates. Now, I told you I'd circle back to the will, so let's talk about that a minute. Some of you, if you don't have a will, you've at least seen one, maybe from a parent or somebody. It is multiple pages long, right? Lots of legalese, legal terms in there. But I'll tell you that about 95% of that is in all wills, okay? It's like template. Now, don't get me wrong, it's needed language. But I'm just saying 95% of that, it's all wills. What we get to customize or personalize is about 5% of that, okay? And these are the areas, typically. Number 1, who's the executor? The executor is the quarterback over the will. They are legally responsible to follow every T that's crossed, every I that's dotted. It's a large amount of responsibility. And again, there's probably most of us in the room, we're mentioned as executor in maybe a parent's will or sibling. So again, you're probably already a little familiar with this. But again, executor, they are responsible to follow that will. That's their job, okay? And you always want to back up. Just like in anything, you want to back up, right? The person. Secondly, what's in that will is, and it may or may not apply to you, but it's who, if you have minor children, who are going to be the guardians? Probably out of everything we're talking about during Sunday school today, that's one of the most important things right there. Okay? You may or may not have much in the way of assets at that point in life, But if you have children, it is so important to have a will. What happens in the state of Louisiana when someone passes away without a will and they have minor children, it is up to the state of Louisiana who's going to raise the children. Had a young mom, single mom, come up to me a while back. She said, Jeff, I've been thinking and planning, and said if something happens to me, I've already told which family member I want to take care of her daughter. And I said, I so admire you for thinking through that, because a lot of folks don't do that. But in Louisiana, it doesn't matter. You have to have that in your will. It has to be in writing for the state to oblige to that. And I will tell you that if you pass away without a will and you have minor children, a lot of times the state of Louisiana wants to find a family member to play that role, okay? But it may not be the family member that you want raising your children, okay? And what I mean by that is you want to think about family members or friends that at least share your same values. Are they believers? Would they raise your kids in a Christian home? Unfortunately, in my family, not every one of my family members are believers. And I would not have wanted them raising my kids because they wouldn't have been brought up in a Christian home. So it's so important to be on the offense, and just as parents, and make sure you've got that in place. And hopefully it's not needed, but it's there if it's needed, right? And so important. And you always want to back up, by the way, to that. Like who's going to be first, and then who's the backup. Okay, and so in a will, you've got the executor who's in charge of it, right? You've got secondly who's in charge of the children, if that's applicable. Thirdly, and it's kind of the fun part of estate planning, is who do you want to benefit one day, right? Who do you want to surprise one day? And so those are the three parts of a will typically. So all those pages and pages of a will, that's what it boils down to, what we get to personalize. You could have one or two unique situations in there as well, but for the most part, that's what's in there, right? That we get to personalize. And I encourage you, by the way, every January to pull that out of the safe. I know not the most exciting reading, but just pull it out of the safe, make sure it's up to date, okay? And so as far as some players involved, as far as individuals involved in the documents, executor we've already talked about, right? It's in the will. The executor is in charge of the will. Secondly, as far as the agent is that person that's in charge as far as your power of attorney. Again, if you're in a coma or something, that's the person that's going to step in your shoes and be you for all practical purposes, okay? And so, again, some of this may be helpful also because, again, you may be the power of attorney for a parent or sibling if that was to ever arise. And so, again, an agent is that person. Third, we've talked about as well, related to guardianships, related to children. Again, so important if you have minor children to make sure you've named them in a will. By the way, some of you have grandchildren that are minors. I encourage your kids to get a will done, right? To name guardians for your grandkids, right? It is so important. Trust. Let me talk about trust for a minute. There's several different types of trust out there. The two I want to talk about just for a moment is, number one, relates to a child's trust, okay? And so what's very common, if you have a will now, you probably have a sentence or two in there that says, okay, if I leave anything to somebody below the age of, and whatever the age that is, 18, 21, 65, whatever it is, okay? If you're leaving assets to someone below the age of, again, whatever that number is for you, basically that goes into a trust, okay? And think about a trust as like an entity, but you've got the manager over that is called the trustee, okay? And that could be their parent, for example. But if you passed away and you've got XYZ% of your estate going to, let's say, a grandchild, basically that typically goes into a trust, right? If it's a minor. A lot of times individuals below, let's say, 18 are not always the best with money. Some are, but some are not. And so it kind of protects them a little bit. And so, or whatever age, right? over the year, one of the questions I've received over the years, Jeff, what's that age that's good to put in there, that document? And it just depends. You want to think about the financial maturity level of folks inheriting from you. I was thinking about a couple right now that I worked with years ago, and him and his wife, and he said, Jeff, we have 2 kids, and he said, if my wife and I passed away today and our children inherited from us, one of those children would have their inheritance 30 years from now because they're a saver, right? Which is a blessing. The other would have it spent on Amazon this afternoon, right? And by the way, that type of thing happens to where it's just blown, right? You've saved for it all your life, it's just blown, right? And so one of the things that people do, and I'll tell you what, let me finish that case study out. That might be helpful to you. And so what we ended up doing, because they were concerned about that, when the kids just spending it quickly. And so what they ended up doing is their 2 kids, and there were 5 ministries, including their church, they wanted to benefit, that they had been of value to them in their life. And so they ended up, in their will, they left a certain percent, after all the bills and debts are paid, they left a certain percent to each child, outright, right? And then a certain percent to some ministries they wanted to help. And then everything else went to this trust, right, for the 2 kids. And the way they set it up is they wanted it to benefit for over 10 years. So if the kids blow it all the first year, they're partially protected, right? Because they're going to get some the second year and the third year and on to the 10. And you can use whatever number, but they just use 10. That's called a child's trust. And so one of the things that people told me over time, well, Jeff, I don't have much, it doesn't matter. And I think more the important question is when you're thinking about who's inheriting from you, are those individuals used to dealing with that amount of money? There are some individuals that would struggle with $10,000. There are some individuals that would struggle with $10 million. You just want to think about the financial maturity level of folks inheriting from you and make sure that you properly prepare for that to protect them. And so again, that's on a child's trust. The second type of trust, and I'll be brief on this, is called a revocable living trust. The word revocable, all that means is changeable. You can change it while you're living. Okay, that's where it comes from. The main purpose of these is to avoid succession or probate. Okay? And you might say, well, Jeff, a while ago, you said in Louisiana we have a pretty efficient system for succession and probate, right? And we do. Where we see people use revocable living trust is when they have property in multiple states. So let's say you've got a house here, and you've got a family farm in Oklahoma or some mineral interest in New Mexico or whatever, Every state that you have real estate, it goes through probate, which means it gets complex on the executor and expensive to the estate, which means less going to those you want to benefit. And so that's where these revocable living trusts come in, usually. Anything that's in those trusts, just avoid probate, okay? But I'd say probably 90% of us in the room, let's say you've got a house here in Louisiana and real estate not outside the state. In those situations, what we see is folks just have a basic will. It's not complex. It's just a basic will, and it gets the job done, right? And so those are the areas I wanted to talk about related to individuals. Let me talk about something really popular for a minute, okay? Taxes, but it's important, okay, related to states. And so there's 2 different types of taxes typically involved with the state. One is called the estate tax. Some people call it the death tax, but it's, and you see that number up there? Almost $13 million is exemption federally. State-wise, at this moment in time, we don't have an estate. We don't have a state exemption, or actually, we don't have a state in Louisiana at all as far as a tax. Now that could change tomorrow, right? That could change tomorrow. But at this point in time, there's not a state tax at the state level, at the Louisiana level. This is at the federal level. And so if about 97% of Americans passed away this year, we would owe no estate tax. Because that number, $13 million, right? If you're married, 26. My wife and I, we're in great shape. We are below that number. And so I mean, we wouldn't be impacted. I will tell you that the foundation, we do work with folks sometimes above that area, above that level. There's some very effective ways to avoid estate tax legally, obviously. But most of us would not be impacted by it. But most everybody in the room, or our heirs, will be impacted by something called IRD tax, okay? Just about everybody in the room has a retirement account, okay? That may be a traditional IRA, and I'm talking traditional, not Roth for a minute. That may be an IRA account. It may be through an employer. Like if you're a teacher, I think it's a 457. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that. I think it's 457 for teachers. If you're a minister, it's 403B. So like for Travis and I, we have 403B account. If you've been in the corporate world, that's probably 401k, whatever numbers you want to use and initials, okay? They all work the same way. Basically, you put money in it, right? And it grows tax deferred all these years. And when you turn what age, you start pulling it out. What age is that? Well, they actually just changed it. I think this was last year, 2 years ago. It's been somewhat recent that age, if you're not already pulling money out of your IRA, it's 73, okay? And so you just check with your financial advisor on that. But it's 73 is the minimum age now if you're not already pulling that money out. By the way, what's that called when you have to pull money out of your retirement account? Required minimum distributions. And those that are in that age bracket know exactly what I'm talking about there. And so one of the items also related to our retirement accounts is I want you to think about when you set that up. So you may have set up a retirement account like through your employer, right? Or IRA at your bank, wherever. And you filled out a beneficiary form. Remember that? That may have been last week. That may have been decades ago. Okay. By the way, it is so important to make sure those beneficiary forms are up to date because those bypass the will, typically, okay? And so I had a CPA come up to me at a church. This was about a month ago up in the Monroe area. And he said, Jeff, appreciate you saying something about that because I had a client that some family dynamics had changed and an individual had passed away and the ex-spouse of that individual, her name was still on the beneficiary form. And she inherited every penny of that, and that was not the intent, right? But that beneficiary form is so important, okay? So just make sure it's up to date as well. But basically, so think about who's on your beneficiary form right now. Kind of get that in your mind. If you were to get to go to heaven today, basically that individual or individuals or ministries or whoever, they go to that company, right? That bank or whoever, or your employer, whoever has that, right? And as they pull money out, the government doesn't forget it hadn't been taxed yet, right? So as they pull money out, they're taxed on it, right? And so I mean, that's and it's usually a pretty significant amount as far as a percent on that, depending upon their tax brackets and all that. I was working with a couple years ago, and as a husband and wife, and they said, Jeff, we have a certain amount of assets. We've got retirement assets. We've got a house and all this, and we want to benefit our daughter in a significant way. And we also want to benefit some ministries that we've had a passion for in our life, including their church. And he said, by the way, Jeff, I want to owe zero tax. Okay? I want my estate to owe zero tax. I don't want my daughter to owe any tax whatsoever. Zero tax. You understand what I'm talking about? I said, yes, absolutely. And so what we ended up doing is the beneficiary of those retirement accounts is whom? So it's ministries. Because a ministry like your church is tax exempt. Right? At this point in time, right? Hopefully that never changes. But so what's pretty cool about that is the beneficiary of those retirement accounts or those 5 ministries, they're not going to owe a penny of tax. Everything else, the house, everything else is going to the daughter. And they're below that 26 million number up there. So basically, everything that's going to occur, there will be no tax from anybody, from the estate, from the daughter, anybody. That's pretty powerful, okay? And so I like to think of it like this. When you and I get to go to heaven one day, there's only 3 buckets we can get to, 3 buckets. Bucket number 1 are individuals. We can bless and be generous to any individual we want to. Family members, friends, maybe somebody in the room today, right? Anybody that you want to bless. The second bucket are what's called nonprofits or charities or like our ministries, like our church and other ministries that we've had a passion for, that we have valued in life, right? Third bucket is what? What's third bucket? Tax. Government, right? Those are the only 3 buckets we can get to when we go to heaven one day. So one of the things I want to encourage you to do is, how do you minimize the tax, unless you think that's a good thing, okay? And how do you maximize what your family as well as the kingdom's receiving, right? And just maximizing that from a stewardship standpoint. And so I want to ask you a question this morning. And by the way, one of the things that we get to focus on in our will, obviously, is who we want to benefit: our family, others. Maybe we have a neighbor or just a close friend we want to benefit, or on your church. You know, the benefit of Hebron in this community and impacting the community with the gospel. On other ministries that you've had a passion for. So that's part of what we get to do in our will, right? When we have one. And so I just gave the answer away. I didn't mean for the number to come up there. One of the questions I was going to ask you is, what's the average amount of time in America that it takes for every penny of an inheritance? Somebody say 18 months. What's the average amount of time, in America that every penny of an inheritance is spent? That doesn't matter whether it's $10 or $10 million. The average amount of time it takes in America for every penny of inheritance to be spent is 18 months, year and a half. Okay? And you probably know where I'm going with this. But what if you could leave part of your estate that would have a perpetual impact, forever impact on the kingdom of God that lasts a lot longer than 18 months? Part of what I do, I encourage folks to tithe their estate. I encourage folks to leave at least 10% of their estate through their will to the church or the ministries they've had a passion for. And because, again, our will represents what we have valued in life, right? And so what I want to do is I want to give you a reminder as well on this. Part of what your foundation's ministry can do for you and your family is we can help you get documents done, okay? If it's a basic will, which 95% of us in the room, that's all we need. We just need a basic will. It's free. We take care of that in our budget. We have an attorney on staff that just helps folks through that process. Helped several individuals this week get their documents done. And so that's part of what we can do for you free through your foundation ministry. If it's complex, we have a different process for that, and Jerry can talk to you about that. Our only requirement, again, it's free, but our only requirement is that at least 10% be left for the kingdom. And we're neutral on what that looks like. That could be your church, that could be whatever it is. We're neutral on that, as long as it's benefiting the kingdom with 10%. And so be honored to help in that way. I want to finish up pretty quickly here. One thing I need to mention, because I've had several folks on evaluation forums tell me, Jeff, you need to mention this. Remember a while ago we talked about IRA accounts, retirement accounts? If you're at least 70 and a half, I know a while ago I used 73, that's a different scenario. But if you're at least 70 and a half, you can actually, your required minimum distributions, you can actually have those benefit the church tax-free. Let me give you a case study. A woman called me a while back. She said, Jeff, I just turned the magic age to where I've got to start taking money out of my retirement account, my IRA, and I'm upset with the government because they're making me pay tax on that. And she said, what are my options? And I said, well, how much are you giving to ministries each year, your church and other ministries? And she told me that number. And I said, so how much is the government wanting you to take out of your IRA account, that required minimum distribution? It's about the same amount. I said, well, change your giving buckets. And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, instead of writing a check to your church, give out of your IRA that amount. And whatever comes out of your IRA, bypasses the tax. So, I mean, you literally save tax money, right, on that. And you don't get a tax deduction on it, but most folks in that age range are not itemizing, so you don't benefit anyway from a tax standpoint. So bottom line is this: by just simply changing your giving buckets, you can save tax money. If you want to holler at us, that's pretty simple to do. That's actually very simple to do. If you want to holler at us, we can talk to you more about that, about how to accomplish that. But I needed to mention that because I've had several folks over the years say, Jeff, you need to mention that. And so let me do this. I want to kind of remind us, when you and I get to go to heaven one day, there's only 3 buckets, right, we can give to. Bucket number 1 are individuals. Anybody we want to benefit, right, as far as individuals. Bucket number 2 is what? Charities, right? Ministries and churches that we want to benefit and have an impact. Third bucket is the government tax, right? So again, how do you minimize the government tax? Again, unless you think that's a good thing. How do you benefit what your family as well as the kingdom's receiving? So I have the honor to often be speaking in churches, and are there some folks that could help me hand these out, these evaluation forms? I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. There's somebody, thank you. I appreciate it. Maybe somebody over here. Thank you. I have the honor to often be speaking in churches, and this is an evaluation form, okay? If there's something you wish I would have covered, please put that on here. It helps me. Just about every week, I'm making an adjustment to this presentation. And so there's a part, thank you. There's a part that's evaluation as well. And then also, if you want more information on something, the foundation, Louisiana Baptist Foundation, we are a free resource to you, okay, because of a cooperative program. And so if you want more information on wills, trust, guardianship for children, trust, anything. In fact, sometimes people just write in a question. We'll follow up with you. And I'll tell you, we are very private, very confidential, okay? And so if you want more information on something, please give us a phone number or email so we can follow up with you. And so I'm going to pause just for like 1 minute, 2 minutes here. If you can help us with this, that would be a great help. So I'm just going to pause just for a minute, and I'll close this out in prayer in just a moment. So, God, we're grateful for the opportunity to be in your house today. God, as I prayed earlier to you this morning, that all the information that we've talked about in this time, God, I pray that it would be helpful to folks here and their families and potentially your kingdom, God. God, I pray that as we enter into a time of worship in a few minutes, God, I just pray that everything that is done, everything that is said, every word that is sung, that everything that is done, God, would bring you glory. Would bring you glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Appreciate you.